What's up, guys? It's BenImparts here because, BenImparts, thought I was being cute. Anyway, today we have yet another episode of this Cryptid cast series, episode 48, where I break down cryptids, their sightings, their possibilities, what they could or couldn't be, and if they could be real or not. And today we have the Stoa, an incredibly fascinating cryptid that is one I love because it combines the world of cryptids with the world of dinosaurs, because the Stoa might be a real-life dinosaur living in an inhospitable area between Venezuela and Brazil. If you like this video, like, subscribe, follow my Instagram, and without further ado, let's get it started. So what is this Stoa? Well, the Czech cryptozoologist Jaroslav Mareš claims that the Stoa is a creature native to the Curupira tepui, or plateau, which itself is, very interestingly enough, named after the Curupira, a legendary Amazonian man-beast-like entity, which is an actual other cryptid video in and of itself. The particular tepui, or plateau, that we're talking about is covered in forest and jungle, teeming with animal life, stands at 3,435 feet above sea level, and is situated on the Venezuela-Brazil border. The perfect place to a dinosaur to hide out. Mareš documented many of his real or claimed findings in his cryptozoological encyclopedia, Svet tajemnic zvířat, The World of Mysterious Animals, published in 1997, spending some time residing at the base of Curupira during an expedition there in 1978. So what is the Stoa, really? According to Mareš, the Stoa is a green creature in colour, larger than an elephant, with huge jaws and short horns above the eyes. It's bipedal, its hind legs are very powerful, and its short forelegs have hands, with a single clawed finger. Small hands, much like a T-Rex. Its skin is supposed to shine, and it's supposed to be covered in warts and irregular scales, especially two horns on its head, which are said to be much like the local frog species. And if it sounds terrifying, it's because it is. Stoas are said to be ravenous carnivores that specialise in eating smaller creatures, and those creatures are said to include people. In its hunting style, a Stoa is said to leap into the air and land on its prey, pinning them down and killing them. Mareš tells of the story of the Stoa as follows. He had written 3 books on the Curupira Plateau: In Search of the Lost World, which documented his 1978 expedition, The Horror Named Curupira, published in 2001, and Sinister Secrets, published in 2005. In the second of these, Mareš mentioned meeting a Scottish gold prospector in 1997, whose name we don't know, but whom he simply calls Riggs, who he'd already met before. He claims that even though he'd met Riggs before, Riggs hadn't told him this story. Until now. Back in the 1970s, Riggs told him he was prospecting in the vicinity of Curupira in the 70s, and had befriended a Waika tribesman named Ritewa, who supplied him with a terrifying Stoa story. Some hunters were hunting in the area, when they unintentionally strayed onto a Stoa while it was out looking for its prey. Stoa usually eats capybaras or tapirs, but sometimes other things. Local law states that when a Stoa latches onto you, when it pursues you, it's impossible to escape from it, and this they found out the hard way. The local archers shot at the Stoa with their guns and arrows, but they failed to penetrate its hard, scaly armour. Then the enraged Stoa roared in a rage, summoning other Stoas. Then all the Stoas fell upon them, and this group of Stoas began to massacre the terrified locals. However, this is when the locals struck back. They used poison darts, raining them in the hundreds onto the Stoas. 2 Stoas died, the rest retreated. The dead Stoas were said, as mentioned in the previous description, to look a lot like the Carnotaurus. They had 2 horns on their head, they had scales all over their skin that were luminescent and shiny, powerful jaws, and 2 small arms like T-Rexes. In other words, it's very likely that the corpses of 2 dead Carnotauruses lay in front of these locals. It's at this point that you might think, we have some evidence at last. But no, we don't, because the locals ate these Stoas. Yes, to celebrate their great victory, they took the Stoa corpses and they ate them. So the locals had evidence of a potential dinosaur, a potential Carnotaurus, a potential bipedal, 2-legged small creature that looks a little bit like a Tyrannosaurus, but is rather like an Allosaurus, and they ate it. For cryptid hunters like me, this is terrible. You had the Stoa in front of you and you ate it for breakfast. Mareš claims that this expedition occurred in the 1970s, and he published the story in the 1990s. However, what could this Stoa really be? Could it be a real creature, or could it maybe, just maybe, be a hoax? Well, Mareš claims his expeditions occurred in the 1970s, and he did go to an expedition to the plateau, but he never actually ascended it. However, he claims this Stoa story happened in the 70s, but he only published it in the 90s, which some suspiciously think seems just late enough for him to talk about a Carnotaurus, which hadn't even been discovered until the mid-80s. Also, describing the horns of the Stoa as like the Carnotaurus, when they've been described as more like the local frog species, is rather strange, since this species of frog, the Ceratophrys, has horns that are actually more like little triangular flaps of skin, whereas the Stoa's horns, as proven by the fossil record, are pure bone. So, the horns above its eyes can't really be similar. Moreover, by his own account, Maresh revealed that this Indian was confirmed in his account by missionaries from the Porto de Maloca settlement on the Rio Malopolao, located approximately 15 miles from Curupira as the crow flies. However, they did not believe the Stoa is real. For them, it's just a part of Waika mythology. So, could the Stoa just be a hoax by an overly ambitious writer? It's possible. He never did actually go up onto the plateau, so he'd never actually seen it for himself, so if he's not lying, maybe he got an inaccurate account. However, there are also reasons to think that the Stoa could indeed be real. All the locals say it's reptilian, and it superficially resembles a giant-sized caiman. In other words, a giant-sized local crocodile. So maybe the Stoa isn't a dinosaur, but it could be some kind of crocodile that's evolved. And remember that dinosaurs are reptiles and are lizard-like in nature, which does make this possible. In addition, in the area, a pterosaur-like beast called the Washiorwe has been seen many times by locals, and that has a horn on the back of its head, giant bat-like wings with membranes, and also seems very dinosaurian. In addition, Arthur Conan Doyle himself, the famous writer, was inspired by this area in writing The Lost World, published in 1912, in which dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and other Mesozoic reptiles have survived into the present day on a totally isolated realm on a plateau at the summit of a very high tepui, which means the same thing. It means plateau. And one of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's inspirations was this Kuripura Tepui. And furthermore, he had learned about the Kuripura Tepui from the famous lost explorer Lieutenant Colonel Percy Fawcett, who in 1908 had led an expedition to some of the great sandstone tepuis in Bolivia in the area. And although he didn't encounter any prehistoric creatures, Fawcett and his team did receive various reports from natives of frightening monsters that were said to inhabit the Kurupira area. And in particular, he was enthralled by Fawcett's tale of an aggressive, bipedal, carnivorous creature called the Stoa, which looked like a Carnotaurus. So in other words, this argument that Maresh must be lying because no one knew about the Carnotaurus in the 80s and 70s is debunked, because back then Arthur Conan Doyle was talking about it, Lieutenant Colonel Percy Fawcett was talking about it, even though, we have to admit for the sake of argument, even though none of these men saw it personally, they encountered so many people who said they did, and there's already stories of strange entities in the area already, that this makes me think that there could be something to it. And there could be something to Maresh's belief that on top of this huge plateau, many prehistoric creatures like dinosaurs live, and that sometimes they occasionally get lost, stray down into the valley, or come down there in search of food. Locals see them and they have interactions with them, and maybe that's why they seem rare to the locals, because mostly they live on this plateau away from human interaction. But what do you guys think? Have any of you lived in the Curupira area? Do any of you live in Venezuela? Do any of you live in Brazil? Can any of you supply any accounts to me? Do any of you have family members or friends who've seen this, or even people who've passed them down throughout history? Please share those in the comments section. Before, I had a story of a guy who wrote about a giant turtle on my Beast of Busco video, and it started a fascinating exchange. So without further ado, I thank you for coming, and I invite you to stay tuned to episode 49. This is BenImparts, signing out.